I've been a first responder for over a decade. Fires, freeway collisions, even one freak incident with a guy stuck in a billboard. I've seen it all. But nothing prepared me for the moment I got tasered while trying to save a dying woman in broad daylight, in a gated suburb, by a guy who called himself security. My name is Alex Rivera. I'm 39, a trained EMT and firefighter, and until that day, I thought bureaucracy was just annoying, not lethal. The call came in at 6:52 a.m. Station 9, Priority 1, possible cardiac arrest at Golden Valley Meadows. Subject is 75-year-old female. Caller reports blue lips and no response. You are 2 minutes out. I was sipping my fourth cup of gas station coffee, already 12 hours into a grueling shift, when the call hit. My partner Jules, sharp, no nonsense, and an ex-Army medic, locked eyes with me. We didn't even speak. The gear was already in our hands, the ambulance already rolling. Golden Valley Meadows was a place I knew too well. Gated, clean to the point of eerie. Rows of pastel-colored houses and homeowners who cared more about lawn edges than human connection. I'd been there twice before, once for a sprained ankle, once for a panic attack. No drama, no problems, just cold smiles and HOA newsletters shoved in our hands when we left. Not that morning. We pulled up to the main entrance. Big iron gates with fake gold tips stretched across the street. A sign read, Golden Valley Meadows, a secure lifestyle community. Jules punched the call button. Emergency medical, cardiac arrest. Open the gate. There was a pause. Then a voice buzzed through, low and robotic. Please state your entry code. Jules frowned and hit the button again. We don't have a code. This is EMS. Let us in now. No entry without clearance. HOA policy. I threw the door open before Jules could say another word, grabbing the med bag and vaulting out of the rig. I could see the house, just 100 yards away. Number 224, with a small red wreath still hanging from the last holiday. The patient was in there. Her name, we'd later learn, was Eleanor Benson. 75. Retired librarian. Grandmother of 5. And she was dying 30 seconds from where I stood. I ran to the pedestrian gate. There was a man standing there, mid-40s, stocky, wearing a navy blue vest with GVM security printed across his chest. He had a walkie-talkie on one side, a taser on the other. His name tag read, Martin Briggs. I didn't wait for pleasantries. I'm EMS. Cardiac arrest. That house right there. Let me in. He didn't move. Just looked me up and down like I was selling magazine subscriptions. You got a pass or a clearance code? He asked flatly. I'm holding a trauma bag and wearing an EMS uniform, I said. That's my ambulance flashing behind me. A woman is dying. Let me through. No code. No entry. He said again, like he was a robot with only 6 lines of dialogue. I stepped forward. I'm not asking. I'm going in. His hand went to the taser. Step back, or I'll deploy. You can't be serious. HOA policy. I took one more step, and that's when I heard it. The snap. The crackle. The burning, paralyzing current ripping through my chest like lightning had struck me straight from the sky. I dropped. My legs gave out. My bag fell open beside me. Oxygen masks, for lines, and a stethoscope spilled onto the concrete like a busted suitcase. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't speak. I saw Jules leap out of the rig and start running, but it was already too late. The clock was ticking, and I was on the wrong side of a metal gate while a man with a badge played God. Inside that house, Eleanor was going into full cardiac arrest. Her husband had called us the moment she collapsed. He was trying CPR himself, but he was 78 and panicked. His hands shaking, his tears falling, all while help was being tossed to the ground outside his front lawn. By the time Jules got the watch commander on the radio and the gate finally opened, 6.5 minutes had passed since the original 911 call. By the time we got to Eleanor, she was gone. Gone. We worked on her anyway. Out of respect. Out of desperation. But the rhythm never came back. She left us on a pristine white couch with a garden view she'd never see again. And all because someone followed policy. Word spread through Golden Valley Meadows like wildfire. In a place where the biggest scandals used to be over who left their Halloween decorations up too long, people now whispered about death. About a woman who could have been saved. About a paramedic who got dropped to the ground for doing her job. One of the neighbors had a doorbell cam that caught everything. My shouting, Martin's blank refusal, the taser firing, my body hitting the pavement. That clip made it to Facebook before sundown. By morning, it was on the local news. By evening, it was national. The HOA board tried to control the narrative. They posted an official statement calling the incident regrettable and claimed Martin misinterpreted protocol. He was placed on administrative leave. Not fired. Not charged. Just suspended, with pay, while they waited to see if the outrage would fade. It didn't. Eleanor's husband, Richard Benson, was a soft-spoken man. The kind who wore sweater vests and read the newspaper on a porch swing. But losing his wife like that flipped something inside him. He wasn't just grieving. He was furious. He hired a lawyer the next day. Her name was Camille Grant, and she didn't do quiet. She walked into every room like she'd already won the argument. Said things like, "We're not just going after the HOA. We're going after the system that made this tragedy inevitable." She filed the wrongful death suit by Friday. And not just against Martin. The whole HOA board was named, individually, for negligence, for obstruction, for creating what she called a hostile environment for emergency response. Residents took sides fast. Some defended the HOA, saying they were just trying to keep the neighborhood safe. "We've had break-ins before," one woman told a reporter. "That's why we voted for tighter security." But most people weren't buying it. She had an ambulance with her. A man snapped during a community meeting. What do you think she was? A burglar in disguise with flashing lights and defibrillators. I was out of the field for weeks after that. The taser had done something to my shoulder, nerve damage. Nothing permanent, but bad enough that lifting a stretcher was off limits. So I sat in physical therapy and stared at the news clips playing over and over again. They showed my face. My fall. My trauma bag open on the sidewalk like spilled groceries. They called me the tasered medic. And every time I heard it, I clenched my jaw so hard I thought I'd break a molar. Jules visited every day, brought donuts, dumb jokes, and enough quiet understanding to make the silence easier. But we both carried guilt. Him, because he was the one stuck on the radio while I got electrocuted. Me, because I hadn't screamed louder, pushed harder, jumped the damn fence if I had to. "You're not the one who failed her," Jules said one afternoon. "Doesn't feel like that," I told him. It was late March when Camille called us in to give our statements for the lawsuit. Her office was downtown, above a jazz bar, filled with books and photos of her dog and a plaque that read, "No one is above accountability." She didn't waste time. Just clicked her pen, opened a legal pad, and said, "Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out." So we told her. Every detail, every shout, every second that ticked by while a gate stood between us and a dying woman. She listened, wrote, and when we finished, she leaned back in her chair and nodded. This is a case the world needs to hear. And it would, because Golden Valley Meadows had no idea what was coming next. The days leading up to the trial felt like the calm before a storm, except the calm wasn't peaceful. It was tense, ugly, like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath and no one wanted to be the first to exhale. Reporters camped outside the gates of Golden Valley Meadows, shoving microphones toward anyone brave or foolish enough to comment. Do you feel safe in your community? Should paramedics have free access? Who's really to blame? The HOA board had gone into full damage control mode. They stopped holding public meetings, locked their clubhouse, and issued every statement through their lawyer. But inside, they were fracturing. Some wanted to throw Martin under the bus. Others said settling was the only option. One board member reportedly quit and moved out of state. Another started telling people he had voted against the security protocols from the start. Meanwhile, Martin Briggs, the man who tasered me, was holed up in his townhouse at the far end of the subdivision. Rumor had it he hadn't stepped outside in days. Some neighbors said they saw food delivery left on his porch and never picked up. Others claimed they heard shouting through his walls at night. What I knew for sure was this: he hadn't apologized. Not to me. Not to Richard. Not to anyone. When the day of the trial finally came, the courtroom was packed. On one side sat Richard Benson, his hands trembling in his lap, Camille beside him flipping through folders. I sat behind them, in uniform. Not because I was on duty, but because I wanted the jury to see me for what I was, a paramedic, not a threat. Across from us sat the board members. Suits. Nervous smiles. One of them wore a tie with tiny American flags on it, like that would somehow shield him from responsibility. Martin was seated with them, looking smaller than I remembered. No vest. No taser. Just a man in a cheap blazer, picking at the hem of his sleeve. Camille's opening statement wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Her words were calm, deliberate, and razor-sharp. This case is not just about one tragic morning. It's about a culture of fear, a system of rules so rigid and soulless that it viewed a dying woman's last chance at survival as a trespass. This HOA built a fortress, and in doing so, it kept the wrong people out. I took the stand first. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I told them everything: how close I was to Eleanor's house, how Martin looked me dead in the eye and refused, how I screamed, how I dropped when the taser hit. I told him we had a cardiac arrest, I said, my voice calm but cold. I pointed to the ambulance. He looked right at me and fired. There was no noise in the room when I finished. Just silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Jules spoke next. He talked about the call, the gate, the radio traffic, the moment he found me on the ground. I saw her bag spilled out beside her, he said, his voice rough. I thought she was dead too. Camille brought in medical experts. They testified about the survival rates of cardiac arrest, the importance of immediate CPR, how every second counts. One ER doctor summed it up in one brutal line. Had Ms. Benson received care within 4 minutes, she had a 40% chance of survival. After 8 minutes, that chance was 0. Then came Martin. He took the stand like he was walking into enemy territory. His voice was small. His hands fidgeted. I was following orders, he said. Camille didn't let him off easy. You saw an EMS uniform, a flashing ambulance, and you thought what? That it was a trick? That we'd fake a medical emergency to break into a house. Martin stammered. I was told no exceptions. That's what the handbook said. Camille stared him down. Do you need a handbook to tell you not to electrocute a paramedic? He didn't answer. When the board members testified, it only got worse. Alan Trent, the president, tried to spin it as a system error. Our protocols were meant to keep residents safe, he said. We never anticipated something like this. But you gave a man a taser, Camille said. And you told him to guard the gate against anyone without a code, including first responders. He paused, sweat forming on his brow. We told him to use discretion. And yet you gave that discretion to a man who tossed a medic. The jury didn't take long. 2 days. That's all it took. They returned with a verdict that made national headlines. We find the Golden Valley Meadows Homeowners Association guilty of negligence leading to wrongful death. Damages awarded to the plaintiff for $1 million. Gasps. Whispers. One board member sobbed openly. But Richard Benson just closed his eyes. And for the first time since his wife's death, I think he finally breathed. The verdict sent shockwaves far beyond the courtroom. Golden Valley Meadows wasn't just a gated community anymore. It was a cautionary tale, splashed across every news outlet in the country. Talk shows debated it. Columnists dissected it. And HOA boards across America began frantically reviewing their own emergency access policies, afraid they might be next. Inside the community itself, the fallout was immediate and brutal. The board dissolved within a week. Alan Trent resigned and put his house up for sale. 3 other members followed. They couldn't walk their dogs without being heckled by neighbors or approached by news crews. One moved out in the middle of the night. Another was seen yelling at a journalist on her front lawn before slamming the door and disappearing for good. The security contractor that had employed Martin Briggs was hit with legal scrutiny. It turned out they never had the proper licensing to issue tasers in the first place. Their contract was terminated. Their website went offline. Their phone stopped ringing. As for Martin, he vanished. Last I heard, he left the state. No criminal charges were filed, something that still makes my blood boil. But his name was scorched into the public record. And in a town like this, reputation is everything. He'll never work security again. Richard Benson didn't celebrate the win. He didn't gloat, didn't brag. He just sat quietly on his porch, staring at the chair where Eleanor used to sit with her morning tea. He told reporters he wasn't interested in revenge, only change. And change came fast. The remaining residents held an emergency election. A new board was formed. People like Linda, a retired nurse who'd spoken out during the trial. Tom, a schoolteacher whose brother was a firefighter. People who believed in safety with compassion, not instead of it. One of the first changes? Emergency service override protocols. No more clearance codes. No more delays. If an ambulance, fire truck, or police cruiser showed up, the gates opened. No questions asked. A direct emergency line was installed at the station and with local authorities. Signs were posted at the entrance. Emergency vehicles get immediate access. No exceptions. The gates stayed. But they meant something different now. Not division. Not fear. Just a reminder of what had happened and what couldn't happen again. Jules and I went back to work 2 weeks after the trial. My shoulder was still sore, the nerves a little unpredictable, but I passed my tests. I was ready. My first call back was a minor car crash on a side street. Nothing dramatic. Just some bruises and one very embarrassed teenager who'd rear-ended a mailbox. But when I stepped out of the ambulance, I realized something had shifted. People clapped. Not a lot. Not a stadium ovation. Just a few folks on the sidewalk, nodding in quiet respect. One man offered us bottled water. A woman handed me a thank you card with a small drawing of an ambulance and the words, "You keep us alive. We see you." And I nearly cried on the spot. Because for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like the tasered medic. I felt like what I was. A responder. A rescuer. Someone who belonged on the front lines, not face down on the grass behind a locked gate. Richard used part of the lawsuit settlement to set up something remarkable, the Eleanor Benson Scholarship Fund, dedicated to helping low-income students become EMTs and paramedics. I was there for the first award ceremony. So was Jules. So were 3 of Eleanor's grandkids. Richard spoke just 4 sentences. That was it. She gave love freely. She believed in service. And she didn't deserve to die behind a gate. Let's make sure no one else does. And that was enough. We don't talk about Eleanor like a victim anymore. We talk about her like a legacy. Because sometimes, it takes a tragedy to spark a movement. Sometimes the smallest decision, one click of a taser trigger, exposes the rot hiding behind the smiles and manicured hedges. Golden Valley Meadows still stands. The houses are still pastel. The lawns are still cut to perfection. But the fear is gone. The rules changed. The people changed. And if you ask anyone what started it all, they'll tell you. It wasn't a lawsuit. It wasn't a video. It was a woman who deserved to be saved, and the paramedic who refused to let her be forgotten. Weeks turned into months. The cameras left. The reporters moved on. But the people at Golden Valley Meadows were still rebuilding quietly, deliberately, like stitching over a scar. The new HOA board held its first open meeting on a warm Sunday afternoon. They didn't sit behind a long table on a stage. They brought folding chairs. Sat in a circle. No microphones. Just voices. And this time, the voices weren't arguing about mailbox heights or patio umbrellas. They talked about neighbors who'd been overlooked. About elderly residents who didn't know how to use the gate system. About a mother who once had to wait 11 minutes for an ambulance because the guard couldn't reach anyone to verify her guest code. They talked about humanity. Clara, the 70-year-old resident who'd originally defended Martin, stood up during that meeting, tears in her eyes, and said something that still stays with me. We built walls thinking they'd protect us. But all they did was keep the wrong people out and trap the right ones in. From that day on, the neighborhood began to feel different. People waved more. They lingered longer on sidewalks. They invited each other over for coffee. That cold, disconnected vibe that used to define Golden Valley slowly melted away. The gates didn't come down, but their purpose shifted. They became symbolic. A reminder that security should never come at the cost of empathy. As for me, I still get nervous every time we pull up to a gated community. My hand instinctively hovers near the door handle. Jules notices. He always gives me a small nod, like saying, "You're good. You're safe." The nightmares come less often now. The flash of the taser. The feel of grass under my cheek. The echo of a dying man's voice begging us to hurry. But there's something stronger than the trauma. The letters. I've received dozens. From paramedics across the country. From nurses. Firefighters. Even police officers. People who said, "Thank you. You spoke up. You made it safer for all of us." And maybe most powerful of all, a letter from Eleanor's youngest granddaughter. Crayon drawings, stick figures in little uniforms. And one simple sentence written in big, uneven letters. "Thank you for trying to save my grandma." That one broke me. But it also healed something. This job isn't about winning. It's not about headlines or lawsuits or viral videos. It's about showing up. It's about trying, even when the world makes it harder than it should be. I didn't get to save Eleanor Benson, but I'll be damned if her death doesn't save someone else. So to every HOA, every board member, every guard out there who thinks a rulebook is more important than a life, don't wait for tragedy to teach you compassion. Because next time, the cameras might not be rolling. Next time, there might not be a lawsuit or a hero or a viral video. Just silence. And someone who never got the help they needed. I'm Alex Rivera. And I'll never stop showing up. Not for a gate. Not for a rule. Not for anything that stands between me and the person who needs me. Never again.